TV3 studios. This is Acadiana's News Channel at 10.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Are some Louisiana residents being denied their constitutional right to a fair trial?
Tonight we pick up part 2 of our investigation on mayor's court. Louisiana and Ohio are the only two states with mayor's courts, where mayors serve as not only mayor but judge and jury in their towns when it comes to enforcing ordinances, mainly traffic violations. But a ruling by the United States Supreme Court back in 1972 was supposed to put the brakes on mayor's courts in some situations. In Ward v. Monroeville, the court ruled in favor of the plaintiff, saying because a, quote, major part of the town's revenue came from fines imposed by mayor's court, the mayor couldn't give a fair trial. In Monroeville, Ohio, that major part was about 42% of its revenue. And as you saw here last night in Washington, Louisiana, fines from mayor's court make up about 71% of the town's revenue. And our investigative team found other courts here in Acadiana that ignore that precedent. I spoke to experts about how that can happen and why these courts are even allowed to operate. 20 Louisiana towns get more than 42% of their revenue from fines imposed by mayor's courts. That's more than the precedent in Monroeville, Ohio, and 3 are right here in Acadiana. Curiously, all are notorious speed traps. Topping the list in the entire state, in fact, is the Jeff Davis Parish town of Fenton. 89% of its revenue comes from fines imposed by mayor's court. Revenue experts say mostly consists of speeding tickets. Then there's Washington and St. Landry Parish, 71%, and Henderson and St. Martin Parish at 49%.
There's a major conflict constitutionally.
Chris DeLay is a criminal justice professor at UL specializing in courts and policy. He says the Supreme Court case from 1972, Ward versus Monroeville, is troubling for many mayor's courts in Louisiana.
Essentially, that's the same thing that's happening here in Louisiana. We just haven't had a case, or we haven't applied the constitutional rule from the Supreme Court to our state.
The crux of the argument, is there a conflict of interest? Can someone serve on both the executive and judicial branch and still remain unbiased even when so much money is at stake?
It relates to the character of the individual and those that the people elect.
Jerry Guillot, an attorney who practices municipal government law and works with the Louisiana Municipal Association, wrote the handbook on mayor's courts in Louisiana.
There's been no court that has cut down the mayor's court that has ruled against it.
But Ward versus Monroeville, which is even cited in Guillot's handbook, does establish a precedent where mayor's courts aren't fair in certain circumstances. But Guillot argues there is a system of checks and balances that the Supreme Court and our local Third Circuit Court of Appeals has upheld. Defendants do have the right to a new trial with a real judge.
Appeals from the mayor's court result in a full new trial at the district court level, where there's a complete hearing of the witnesses and of the offense and so forth.
It's not enough because, number one, you've been denied due process in the mayor's court. Okay, essentially, you've been found guilty to fund the city of XYZ, whoever it might be. That's not fair.
It's an argument echoed by some who've been pulled over and tried in mayor's court. Like George Blakely, issued a ticket in Washington for going 80 in a 75.
I really don't think it's fair, you know, to have the mayor being the judge, looking at it from one view.
If I was one of those individuals, I would want to take this directly to the Supreme Court as a violation of a fundamental civil right. So make loud noises, contact the media, contact your legislator. They may in turn do something.
In addition to calling your legislator, what else can you do if you've been tried in a mayor's court? Well, state law allows an appeal in a real court with a real judge. And in Acadiana, you can even appeal if you've pled guilty. According to the mayor's court handbook, you can file for an appeal in mayor's court or write to the clerk of court within 30 days. And keep in mind, you do not have to pay a fine or penalty to the mayor's court while an appeal is pending. And you can read more on our investigation on mayor's courts over on KTC.com.
Here's Rob's 24-hour forecast.